Hello and welcome. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception, and we are here in Genesis 35. And it's very interesting. We're going to be talking about a lot of things today. And initially, we might look at this text and think, okay, this is just kind of a travelogue. There's a lot of stuff, but nothing really big here. It's not like Genesis 12 or Genesis 6 or 28 when Jacob is fleeing from his brother, or 27 where he's deceiving his father. But there's a lot of stuff here. I'm just going to give you a rundown of kind of the topics that are going to be discussed as we go through this text. First of all, the important thing of the reassurance of the faithful, something that we see again and again in the lives of the patriarchs and the lives of the faithful throughout the Old Testament in general. We're going to see cosmic geography, spiritual warfare played out on earth. We're going to see dedication to God put into practice in a very practical way, what that meant for Jacob, and we're going to apply it to our lives today. We're going to hear about something called the terror of God and how that terror of God protected Jacob. We're going to apply that to our lives. Jacob's going to get a new name. It happened before. It's going to be reaffirmed here. It's going to be changed to Israel. We're going to talk about that. God Almighty, that name El Shaddai. What does it really mean? Is it being properly translated? We're going to see the blessing given to Abraham, reassured to Jacob. And then we're going to have the sad thing where Rachel dies and Benjamin is born, kind of a sad thing, happy thing. We're going to see a perverted power play by one of the sons of Israel. And then finally, the chapter wraps up with the death of Isaac, someone we might well have forgotten about now as we journey through the text, and so much of the text is about Jacob. So let's jump in. Let's look at all these interesting points as they appear. Then God said to Jacob, "Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to God who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esau, your brother." God comes to him. When does God come to him? We don't know. It says this, then. We do not know how much time had passed. And what is it that immediately precedes here? We've got that situation with Hamor at Shechem and the two sons, Simeon and Levi, that, Dinah had been violated. They kind of made a treaty with the people there and then killed them all and took all their stuff. We saw that disobedience of the sons of Jacob, and where we left things was Jacob was very concerned about his well-being. We are few, they are many, and you have made us a stench in their nostrils. So this pattern of God coming to the patriarchs, and it extends beyond the patriarchs, but we're in Genesis, so we'll just limit it to them. This pattern of God coming to the patriarchs and reassuring them, it very often happens right after something traumatic, something unsettling, and that thing that we always have to remind ourselves, they were sojourners. They had no land to speak of their own. They were at the mercy of the powers that were around them. And let us not forget that those powers are the powers of darkness, those nations that served the other gods who had been placed over them, who had rebelled and run amok with that power. So they were in opposition to Yahweh. That was the geography the political and spiritual. Do you see how these things wrap together? We separate them in our minds. Political, spiritual, geographical. We can see how political and geographical go together. But the spiritual is combined with these things. But God appears and says to Jacob, and here it doesn't say he appears in this instance, just says he said to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there and make an altar there to God who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esau, your brother. There is an interesting thing here that I didn't even put in our summary of, list off in our summary of what we're talking about today, and that is that Jacob is going to retrace the movements of Abraham. He's going to go to the key sites that in the life of Abraham and his father were significant. Have you ever gone back to the family homestead, that town that was the hometown for your entire family? And maybe now in this modern world, everyone's moved away, but you go back and just being there in the hometown where your parents and their parents and their parents grew up, and you see the homes in which they lived, perhaps the home that you lived in as a child. It's nostalgic, but it also brings back memories. It's very easy to remember in that setting who your father was, his background, his upbringing, why he became the man that he did. Well, that is going on here as he goes from Shechem up here. That's where that incident with Hamor and Simeon and Levi happened, and he's traveling to Bethel down here that had significance in his life. Bethel is where he saw that ziggurat, that ladder going up into heaven, and the sons of God, the angels of God, ascending and descending. That is when, back in chapter 28, he was on his way to Padan Aram, way up north there, where he went and found his family and all the things that have intervened in the intervening chapters. When he says, go there and dwell there and make an altar there to God. Dwell. Before he was on the run, he had that vision. He put the stone up as a stone of commemoration, a pillar, poured oil on it, but then he had to keep going. Why? He was running away from Esau. God's taken care of his Esau problem. God's taken care of that. He's redeemed that, if you will. And now he's saying you can go to Bethel and dwell there. And not only dwell there, just as your father did, just as your grandfather did, and you did before. Well, he put a pillar up, but make an altar. Abraham had built an altar there. Make an altar. Worship me there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esau, your brother. And if you go back and look at Genesis 28, he says, I'll bring you back here. God tells him that in that section. We're not going to jump to it because we've got so much to cover, but it's right here, Genesis 28, 10 to 22. You can go look at that. He said, I'll bring you back and I'll give you all this land. But all of these things are brought to mind for him as he goes there. And this thing about building an altar, we'll talk more about that when it gets down farther in the text to when he gets there. Let's see, make sure. And we'll go ahead and talk about the altar. We'll talk about it now. Cosmic, geography, spiritual, cosmic warfare. Bethel, that place, was a place that was significant in the worship of the pantheon that was worshipped in this area. And you know who the head of that pantheon was? It was a god named El. Talk about trying to take the glory of the true God, El, Elohim, one who called himself Elohim. El, basically, and the one you've heard of is Baal. Baal is the right-hand man of El. And at Bethel, which got renamed, at Bethel, that was where historically there had been worship of that false god, El. And so now, just as Abraham had, build an altar there. It's like going to the moon and planting a flag. It's like landing on new territory back in the days of the explorer and sticking a flag in the land and saying, I claim this for the king or the queen or whatever it is, putting an altar there and worshiping God, taking that place that had been dedicated to worship of the false god. And it was a real spiritual entity, but it was not God Most High, and claiming that land. That's spiritual warfare that is going on, being carried out by whom? This nobody sojourner. God accomplishes mighty things through that which does not appear mighty and powerful. Think about Jesus Christ and his life of humility, not respected by the powers that be, and yet he conquered them all, worldly and otherworldly. Important theme, that all in itself. But they're on the way there. And what does he say? Verse 2. See, all of that was in verse 1. Stop and think about that. Think of everything that's loaded in verse 1. If you have an Israelite in your head, someone who understands the significance of these things, what I try to help you do is to let that little Israelite in your head grow, build him up or her, so that you can hear the text the way they heard the text, because the text is written for you, but Moses did not write it to you. He wrote it to the people of his day, and we have to have their perspective and their understanding if we are to get everything out of the text. And think, if you didn't have those ideas in your head, have me pointing them out to you, you'd read through this text and say, that's interesting. Moving on. We just spent 10 minutes on it. And Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you, purify yourselves and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make an altar there to God, who answered me in the day of my distress. Chapter 28, and has been with me in the way which I have gone all the intervening time, those 20 years plus. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods that were in their hands, and the earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree, which was by Shechem. What's going on here? What's going on here? We could dub this section dedication to God, but the question is, what are these people doing with foreign gods and whatever this is with the earrings? We'll get to that. Why do they have this stuff? Well, remember a couple things. Rachel had taken her father's household gods and hid them, and he didn't get them. Laban didn't get them when he came to search for them. She still had those, but then their troop had grown. They conquered Shechem, and they didn't just kill the men. They took the women, the kids, the animals, and their stuff. And in all of those houses were the false gods, many of them made out of precious metals and the like, other things. Those people were with them. So Jacob, in an act of worship, is saying, put away all that stuff that appeals to you, that calls to you, that lures you away from dedication to the one true God. And what does he do with all that stuff? He buries it at the bottom of that terebinth tree. And we've talked about trees before. Trees were symbolic of places where God appears. Very often, God appeared near these big trees, the oaks of Morah. Remember that? This terebinth tree. God would appear there. That's why the false worship of Asherah, they made poles imitating trees. And trees are reminders Gods live in gardens on mountains. They're big, tall trees, last a long time. Got a big oak tree in my yard. Got no idea how long that thing has been here. It's been a long, long time. The thing is probably older than I am. But get rid of all that stuff. What does God call us to do? All the things that would lure you away from him, that would take your attention, your focus, things in which you place your hope, your trust, things in which you falsely believe you have your security, put it away. Get rid of it. It's coming between you and your God. Change the way you think about things. The growth in faith that we desire is a process, an ongoing process of rebirth. And that is what Jacob is calling on the people to do. God has kept all his promises. We're rededicating ourselves to him. And again, he's the patriarch. His extended family that has grown now with all these people from Shechem, that extended family is him. That's the way they viewed it. So he took all the foreign gods and then the earrings. And the ladies out there are saying, why the earrings? What's up with that? And what I think of, and you can see over here in my note, from Home Alone in the airport, she's already got earrings, a whole shoebox full of them, big dangly ones. Why do the earrings? Why does the big box of dangly earrings have to go? Well, it has to go because these just weren't earrings. And I'll just read this from the commentator Sarna in the Jewish Publication Society commentary. These are no ordinary pieces of jewelry, but talismans adorned with pagan symbols. They had images of gods on them. It was part of the culture. We won't dig into all of that. But he hid them under the terebinth tree that was by Shechem. Basically, the spiritual significance of that is it is as though he's taking all that stuff and burying it at the foot of God. There in front of that tree. We talk about taking things, burdens that we carry, things that we thought were going to be a blessing to us and we realize aren't, and we bury them at the foot of the cross, spiritually speaking. We lay them there and say, these are nothing to me, I just want you. And that's what was going on there at the terebinth tree. And we've talked about the spiritual significance in their time of trees. Now this cool thing happens. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were all around them, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. Let's just stop with that. So this is the terror of God. Now, what is the terror of God? It's talked about in different places, but we really don't get an absolute. God just put his fear of him, not of Jacob, of him. He did this also with the Exodus. Let's look at Exodus 15:16. This is right after they'd crossed the Red Sea. Fear and dread will fall upon them by the greatness of your arm. They will be as still as stone till your people pass over, O Lord, till the people pass over whom you have purchased. That's Moses and his Song of Moses, and then many other references. God here saying, I will send my fear before you. I will cause confusion among all the people to whom you come, and will make all your enemies turn their back to you. Most of us haven't been in a fight. You don't turn your back to somebody in a fight. God, and in many other instances, you can see them here, and if you want to pause and look at those, you can. Instances where God put his fear in the enemies of his children, of his people. Why? Jacob and his 12 sons, there were still just 11 at this point, had made themselves a stench to the people around. Do you think that the people in the other kingdoms around there saw what had happened, what they did, at Shechem to Hamor and everyone there and said, oh, that's too bad for them. Oh, they're coming by our way. Hope they don't attack us. Do you think that's what they would think? Or do you think that they would think, these guys we better take care of before they come and mess with us? Plus, they've got a lot of wealth and women and children and animals and gold and silver. Let's kill them and take it. That's exactly what they would have thought. And that is what the thing of which Jacob was afraid, the consequence that put fear in his heart. But God is saying, I got you. You don't have to worry. And here's the application. Don't forget whose you are. When the troubles of life, illness, financial distress, political uncertainty in the country in which you live, difficulty of any kind, when it comes upon you, do not forget whose you are. You are a child of God. He views you as dear and special, and he is going to take care of you. He is going to do what is best for you. And if that means putting the fear of God in your enemies and opponents, he will do it. And that's why they didn't pursue the sons of Jacob. So Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, and he and all the people who were with him came to Luz, that is Bethel. You notice I put, it's a parenthetical statement here in the New King James Version, and I highlighted it in green just to remind us. In the text, Moses wrote this text. Later, at different times, a scribe, those who copied these texts, because it wasn't done by InterVarsity Press or Zondervan or anybody else or Logos, Lexham Press. People hand copied these things, okay? God preserved the text because it's inspired by him. It's his text that he had Moses write. But at different times, a scribe would put in, that is Bethel, Luz. That Luz had been its name before. So that name would have had no meaning to people in Moses' day, or after Moses' day, let's say in the time of Solomon, or whoever it might have been. So they would add these little notes that gave insight to the modern reader, the historical modern reader, if you will, as to where these places were. And they passed through, and he built an altar there and called that place El Bethel, because there God appeared to him when he fled from the face of his brother. Now I'm going to read this, and part of it is going to be in Hebrew. And it's not that complex, so follow with me. This is the way it would read, and I'm not going to read all of it in Hebrew because that would make no sense. And he built an altar there and called the place God of the house of Bethel, because there, El being God, El, house of El, because there El appeared to him when he fled from the face of his brother. El, God's name, appears in the singular and in the plural. The singular is El, in our language, El, just like you see there on the screen. It also appears as Elohim, which is the plural form. And the way that looks, let's take a look. So here's El. This is right here is El, Beth, El. And Beth means house. And you'll see on synagogues, Beth this, Beth that. And here is Elohim. Elohim, the God. Elohim. This is the him part on the end just makes it plural. And we're not going to go into why sometimes God's name appears in the plural, but him calling it El, house of El. He's poking El in the face. That false god El, who was pretending to be the real God, who was Baal's boss, king of the pantheon of the Canaanite pantheon. He's poking him. He's using God's name El, the true God's name El, and building an altar there dedicated to him. He's spitting in that false god's face. This is cosmic geographical warfare. He's claiming this for the one true God. He's claiming it as the promised land for the descendants of the one true God. And the reminder there, God appeared to him when he fled from the face of his brother. He's come back. It's commemorating the completion, the fulfillment of God's promise to him. Now, a sad note. Now, Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried below Bethel under the terebinth tree. So the name of that was called Alon Bakuth, terebinth tree of weeping. They also buried her there because you would bury people in holy sites. That was something else that they did. That's carried on throughout the ages. Churches have a cemetery very often, not today as much, but going back not all that long ago, if you go to an older church, there's a cemetery outside. You buried your people in that holy place. And Deborah was, and I can't even remember off the top of my head, she was the mother of a number of Rebekah's. And I had said Rachel for Rebekah before. She was the one who had kids for Rebekah. Okay. At least I haven't put Moses on the ark or had Noah writing the Pentateuch today. Those are always struggles as you speak rapidly about different things. And then here again, God is going to appear, that theme. Reassurance. And what do you have? You have blessings that Jacob didn't have. What do you have? You've got the Bible. It's probably on your phone. It can go with you everywhere. It can be read out loud. You have God's complete testament of salvation, old and new, in its fulfillment. You have the assurance, the foundation of faith that is the salvation that came through Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the Savior upon whom they were waiting. You have the assurance right there on your iPhone, on your Android, on your computer, on your shelf. He did not. So God would come and assure him again and again that, remember, I'm a grandfather. Most awesome thing, being a grandfather. I am a grandfather, expecting another grandchild soon. I see my children raising their children, and they treat them as children. Children need attention. A 3-year-old doesn't need the same care that an 8-month-old does. You treat them differently as they grow. The family of God, the little infant nation that was Abraham, Isaac, and is still just Jacob and his 12 sons, is growing. And so he treats it with a degree of care and direct intervention that he will not use when it is a full-grown adult. Then God appeared. This time it says he appeared. He's there. Then God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padan Aram and blessed him. So he's come all the way down from up north where he found his family, Leah and Rebekah, and he blessed him. He blessed him. He blessed Abraham. He said, and we're going to go back and read it because it is so important. Now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country and from your family and from your father's house, which was Padan Aram up north. The land that I will show you, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. That's you and me right there. We've been blessed through this. But this blessing brings all that to mind, and he's applying those truths, those blessings. And what's a blessing? A blessing is something that God speaks into existence in your life. A blessing is something that God does and you receive. And he's making it clear. Because you know what? I'm dumb. I forget things. I get distracted. I get distraught. I get burdened down carrying things that I shouldn't carry. And God has to come and remind me of his truths, his blessings again. And that's for me. And I've got all this Bible software. I've got more Bibles than I can count and got it on my phone. God appeared to Jacob to assure him that those blessings that were to your father and his father are also for you. And God said to him, your name is Jacob. And remember all that stuff that Jacob meant? The supplanter, the tricky guy, the usurper. And his life had been that. His life had been that. God is going to change that name because he has other things in mind for Israel, Jacob, going forward. Your name shall not be Jacob anymore, but Israel shall be your name. So he called his name Israel, and God said to him, well, we'll stop there. So he called his name Israel. He had done this when he wrestled with him. He had mentioned this then, but he's reaffirming it. You've come home. You've come, and all these things are in Jacob's mind. You're back here in Bethel, where I appeared to you and promised I would bring you back here and give you this land. And that name in Jacob that meant all those negative things and tied him in his mind to all those misdeeds. Think of Saul, the murderer and persecutor of the church, whose name was changed to Paul. New life, new name. His name now is Israel, which has to do with wrestling and struggling, and it can mean God will struggle. God struggling with God, which Jacob did, but also God will struggle. God's watching out for you, just as he had sent that terror before him. A new name, a new life, a new future, and the past is gone. That's why we don't need to carry those burdens. I can look at myself and see nothing. If I use the correct lens, I can see nothing but that I'm a veritable gold mine of adamant shortcomings. God doesn't see me that way, and he's redeemed all of that. He's washed it all away, and he says, you're my child. What does it say in Revelation? He puts a new name upon us, and that we are his dear child. And going forward, that's the way he wants us to look at the future. I am his dear child, and he will struggle for me. He will take care of me. He will pave the way. And remember, faith, it's a hand-in-hand walk with God. I want to hold on fast and let him lead me. And I do that by being in his word prayerfully, asking his blessing, asking that he would open my eyes to see the things that he wants me to see. Because there's so much material packed in here, we're going to stop here. We're going to do a part 2 of Genesis 35, and that'll be out in just a couple of days. So come back for that. I want to thank you for listening. I pray this is a blessing for you. This is Matthias 76. Make sure and hit that like button, subscribe, leave a comment. Those things tell the YouTube and BitChute, show this to more people. You want to share this with more people? Just do those things. Like, subscribe, comment. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception. God bless and have a great day.